Yeah, I was living in the mountains, beautiful mountains, deep in the woods in a palace that I met there by chance. It was a gorgeous palace. It had its own water springs. We were surrounded by mango trees. You can never try a better mango than wild mangoes. We only heard the birds. Everything was so natural there. The air was so clean. We barely saw a car or heard a motor. What we didn't know is that there was a hurricane forming. There was a hurricane coming. The hurricane was called Agatha, and we got a warning from it on the night before. So we didn't have time to get supplies. We had neighbors from around the palace that came for refuge. I was shooting video from the window of my bedroom. That cobbled road you see in front of us, that's the only way in or out of the palace. Take a note of that. We were all very relaxed. Everybody had been through hurricanes, including myself. So we just knew that it was gonna get windy and wet, probably even thunders and something like that. But nobody was very concerned. The people that went there for refuge only brought some food for the day, for the night, and nobody expected that this would last too long. It started to rain, and well, everything was as expected. There was a lot of wind, there were some branches falling, and then things started to get a bit nasty. The covered road turned into a river with a very strong current. What was very strong rain expected from a Category 2 hurricane turned into what I can only describe as standing below a waterfall. In fact, there were waterfalls all around us. The ground shook as big boulders and tree trunks came rolling down the river. The tree trunks rolled down so fast that I couldn't take video of them. And when I saw that river, I got nervous. It had been a long time since I got nervous. Because when I saw that river coming down, I thought about the possibility of a bigger landslide coming down, and that could easily bury us. So then it happened. Yes, I spelled myself. How can you spell yourself? Well, first, let's talk about how spells work. A spell is an intention. When you put an intention in something, the energy responds. It's very easy for water to respond to intention, as the experiments of Yasaro Emoto showed, that Japanese man that throws water particles, and he showed how water responded to intentions. So that day I was so scared that I started saying, this is getting scary. So the water was programmed to feel scary on my body. My body would then think that water is scary. That spell will make itself evident during the next few days. All the other people in the building were in the lower floor, but they had to climb to the second floor because they started getting full of water and mud. And the princess, who had lived there all her life, she said that she had never seen anything like that. There was destruction everywhere, falling trees, broken branches. The whole landscape had changed. By around 9 p.m., 9:30, the whole thing was over. And fortunately, everybody in the palace was okay. And I told the princess, you know what? I think this is one of those events that changed the landscape. And she agreed. What we didn't know is that that hurricane would change everybody that was there's lives in a dramatic way. On the next day, we saw the scope of destruction, and it was heartbreaking. There was a landslide that almost carried away the king's chariot. There was mud all around the palace, about 1 foot deep or deeper even, all around the palace. The swimming pool was about 3/4 full of mud or dirt, and the rest water. There was no electricity or running water. The streams have been completely covered in mud, and the hoses were all torn down. Probably worst of all the roads to the castle were completely gone. The king came to me and told me that those services would not be reestablished within months. So it became clear that I would have to leave. So I went up the cobble road to assess the situation. And it was no longer cobbled. It was all full of debris, rocks, and branches. But it only went on for about 20 meters. After that, it was completely gone. The road was completely gone. You had to hike out of there. So I went all the way to the paved road, which is maybe about 1 kilometer from the palace. And the paved road was still paved, but it was not much different. As far as I could see, both ways, there were trees and rubble all along the road. So I started walking downhill, and on that direction, you would see the closest town in about a 25-minute drive, if there was a road. But at that point, you cannot see more than maybe 20 meters of pavement without seeing something completely blocking the road, from huge trees to big rocks or even swamps that have formed in the middle of the highway. So I started walking downhill, and after about 15 minutes, I saw a couple of men from the electric utility, and they told me that they've been walking uphill for about 4 hours, and that was a complete disaster area. There was no electricity in all the road, all the way until the town. At that point, I concluded that the best thing I could do would be to walk all the way down to the next town. And if 2 healthy men could do that walk uphill in about 4 hours, I estimated that maybe I could take about 5 hours at the most to reach the town. So I went back to the palace, and I informed the princess and the king that I would be leaving the next day, because there was nothing to stay there. In fact, we didn't even have food. We had about maybe 2 days worth of food. So that night we had dinner together. We joined the food we had, and we planned my departure the next day. Of course, we were all worried because we knew it was a very deserted road. There were no cars, probably very few people. So it might be dangerous if something happened. There was no one to help around. And well, there are many things that we could not foresee. So the next day, I packed a very small bag, as small as I could, and as light as I could. I did not know when I was gonna be able to get the rest of my stuff, so I just took what was more valuable to me, which was my working equipment and my phone, my computer, and some clothes. So the next day, the princess was kind enough to make me some sandwiches, which were both our food, my dog and I, what we ate all the way down. And we said goodbye, and I left. At first, I had to climb through very rough terrain all the way to get to the paved road. But when I started going down, it felt great. I mean, it was an adventure. I had the whole day in front of me. It was early, relatively early, about 10 o'clock in the morning. I had plenty of time. And, well, the landscape, I always loved that landscape. That road was a beautiful road. Even now with the rubble and all the disaster, it still was a beautiful road. So it was an exciting adventure, at the least, to say the least. That day I left for the town. I had 3 cameras with me, but none had any charge because I had no way of charging them. So I had no way of taking pictures of what I saw that day or video. But later on, I would go up and take some pictures of my favorite restaurant where I used to go there and eat 3 or 4 times per week. This is how it looked like before the hurricane, and this is after the hurricane. It got completely destroyed, but the family that lived there was all right. They managed to escape before everything came down. On the night before, when I was having dinner with the princess, we went through everything that might go wrong, from falling branches to landslides to maybe even falling off a cliff. But we could never foresee the first problem that I had. After about maybe an hour walking, I came across a huge swamp. It was like a muddy swamp. Maybe it went high up the mountain, but I could climb and start walking on top. And as soon as I do that, I start sinking. And when I tried to pull up, I sank all the way down to my knees on both legs. And I cannot move. I cannot move an inch anywhere. It was like having my legs in concrete. So at first I thought silly because I couldn't relate that I was having that problem. But as time went and I could not move 1 inch, I started getting worried. There were a couple of things. First, beside me there was a mountain that looked like it might come down again and maybe even bury me. And the other one was my dog. She was running all around me because she was very stressed when I couldn't get out. And she was almost sinking on some places. And I thought, if she sinks, the mud is gonna be higher than her. So I'm not gonna be able to rescue her. And I started worrying about that. And then I thought maybe somebody will pass by and can help me, but there was no one. And I waited there for about 20 minutes and no one passed. So I started getting very desperate, and I started digging, and as I dug, more mud came in, and I kept digging and more mud came in, and it took me a while, but I finally freed one leg and then another, and in all it took me about 40 minutes, and that's how much time I lost there. So then I keep coming down, and sometimes there were these little houses beside the road. Most of them were deserted, but some of them had people in them. And then they said, "Hey, where do you come from? And where are you going?" And everybody cheered me, and there you go, there you go. And it was very exciting. And then I saw a man, which I thought he was dead. He had a hard hat, which was lying beside him. He was on the pavement, completely unconscious. And the hard hat looked very much like the two men I met the day before. Maybe he was like, I thought that maybe he was a technician and some tree fell over him, and that's why he was unconscious. I couldn't see any blood or anything, but I tried talking to him and he did not respond. So I got worried. I thought maybe he's dead. And I kept walking down, and the first people I saw, I sounded the alarm. I said, "There's an unconscious man on the road back there." And they go like, "Oh no, we know him. He's always like that. He's drunk." And I'm like, "Okay, he's not hurt?" No, we'll go pick him up later." I go, "Okay." So I keep walking down, and besides the beautiful landscapes that used to be mountains of green, never-ending green, and now they looked grayish and brown, it looked like a fairy tale story. Besides all the road down, it looked and felt like walking through different worlds. Some of these worlds were made of mud and branches. Some of them were swamps. Some of them were landslides that were only rocks about the size of my fist. And there was a part where there was a kitchen, a full kitchen with on the road. Somebody's kitchen came down. It was very interesting, a very interesting way down. After about 6 hours of walking, I reached the first town, which where I could see people here and there. So I started feeling a lot better, a lot safer. And I was not hungry because I've been eating the sandwiches that the princess made. But I stumbled into a land that looked out of paradise. It was a mango tree that dropped all the mangoes on mud. So the mangoes remain intact. And usually when mangoes fell, they break, and you cannot eat them like that because they get full of worms. But these ones were completely intact. So I sat down. They were in public land. They were in nobody's land. And I started eating the mangoes, and they were delicious. The best mangoes I ever tried, I think, in my life. They were wild mangoes. They tasted like ice cream. Delicious. So I started eating one after the other. I was not even hungry, but they were wonderful. So I one after the other, and if you ever eaten wild mangoes, you know they are very juicy. So I was all full of mud and mango, and I didn't care because I was having such a good time. And I think somebody saw me and they thought I must be starving. So a boy came, maybe he was around 12, and he comes and says, "Hey, ma'am, would you like some coffee?" And I said, "Hey, is there a coffee shop around here?" And he goes, "No, no, no, in our house. My mom told me to come and tell you." And I was like, "Okay." So I packed some mangoes on my bag and I followed him to his house. And they were very nice to me. They gave me coffee. I looked like a refugee, and they gave me coffee and bread, and we talked about my adventure, and then I kept going. When I finally reached the town, it took me about 7 hours. I was very concerned that I would not find a hotel because I was so muddy and I was with a dog. So I kept going until I went to the only hotel that they knew me, because I stayed there maybe 3 weeks before, and I stayed only one night, but maybe they remember me that I left a good impression. So I asked them if I could stay, and they said yes, but you have to shower out here because if you shower like that in there, you're gonna clog the whole drainage. And okay, I said there's no problem. So I started with a hose, and I took all the mud out. There was like a cascade of mud, and well, I was home. So what happened with this spell? Well, I put the intention on both my body and the water around me that water should be something scary. I completely forgot about that, and I didn't even care about it. But then my lungs started to fill with fluid because of the humidity that was all around, and little by little I started losing my breath. So the only solution was to lock myself up in a place where I can dry the air, and I had the humidifier for that and the air conditioning as well as a fan. The only problem is right now that I cannot go out until this diminishes, because I may die. I may drown in my own phlegm. So I've been locked up to the making of this video about a month, and I'm still going for another month until I can even unmake the spell, or that my body can adapt back to humidity. So that's my story.